guys, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to my August wrap-up. So the month of August was the magical readathon for William Academy. It was the autumn equinox. I was going for, I should probably know what profession I was going for. Brief pause. I was going for the calling of Mage Hunter, and I am proud to say that I did manage to complete all of my prompts for it. It took me down to the very last minute, but I did actually manage to read all of the things that I needed to. So as a quick refresher, I needed to have a D in spells and incantations, which means that I needed to use a color wheel and pick a book with a corresponding color that the color wheel landed on. I needed to find somebody else's TBR and pick something off of that, and then I needed to annotate a book. I also needed a Q in conjuration, which means that I needed to read a book that had necromancy themes and a book that had a bone in the title or on the cover or somewhere along those lines. And then I also needed an O in restoration, in which I read a book where there's a single object that's the focus of the cover. Before I jump into all of the books that I read last month though, let's first do all of the stats as per usual. So in the month of August, I managed to complete 7 books for a total of 2,568 pages. Unfortunately, out of those, none of them were any of the arcs that I needed to have read, but I didn't DNF anything and I didn't reread anything old. As for my series statistics, I started 4 new series, I read 2 books in continuing series, and I read 1 standalone. The formats that I read everything in differed widely, so I read 1 book purely physically, 1 book only on audio, 2 books as ebooks, and then I had 1 book that I read both physically and on audio, and 1 book that I used all 3 formats for. The genres were pretty typical for me last month. 6 of them were fantasy, 1 of them was romance, so nothing really surprising there. The more surprising part was in terms of my star ratings, so 3 of them were 5 stars, 3 of them were 4 stars, and 1 was a 2-star, and I will get into that at the end. In terms of the age ranges, 5 of them were adult, 2 of them were for young adults, and I think 6 were regular novels and 1 was a graphic novel. So that's all of my stats. Now in terms of the books themselves, the very first book that I started, but not the first book that I finished, last month was Engines of Empire by R.S. Ford, and this became one of my favorite books that I read last month. It wasn't quite the top one that I read, but it definitely was up there. This is a fantasy book. I don't really know how to describe what's going on. It's definitely political fantasy. The magic system is definitely different than anything you've ever seen before. The world is different than anything you've ever seen before. Essentially, you follow various characters from a very high-ranking political family. So you follow Rosamund, who is the matriarch. You follow Connell, who is the eldest brother, you follow Tyrita, who is the only sister, and you follow Fulrin, who is the younger brother. They each go on their own journeys throughout the course of this story, and they kind of all have to come to terms with something that they were not ready to yet accept. They definitely learned a lot about the world around them, all of them did, and a lot about how privileged they were before any of this started. I don't really know how to describe the actual plot of this book other than I really, really enjoyed it. All of it was so new, it felt like something so fresh, and all of the characters, it was differing points of view, so you got all of their points of view, including 1 or 2 others that I won't talk about here, but it was so entertaining. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I cannot wait for book 2. I've kind of already emailed the publisher asking if that's a possibility that I might be able to get my hands on it early, so we'll see, fingers crossed, but I think it comes out in maybe March of next year. It's a long wait. And it was, I don't think it quite ended on a cliffhanger, but it didn't end with anything nearly close to being settled, so there's a long way to go in that story, and I'm very, very excited to see where it goes next. Next, I picked up Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. This was a delight. So this was a standalone fantasy for, I think it was young adult, and it, honestly, I was not sure how I was going to feel about it at the very beginning. I had heard a lot of people really raving about this for the last couple of months. T. Kingfisher has been, like, having this resurgence on Twitter and everywhere with all of their books, and Nettle and Bone has been talked about all over the place. And it's well deserved. I listened to the audiobook for this. I don't think I read any of it physically, and I loved the narrator. I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to feel about the prose, though. It felt a little bit almost ethereal kind of in the beginning. It's very hard for me to describe, so I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, but as soon as things started rolling and happening, it sucked me right in. The characters, the relationships, the animal companion, all of it. I loved it so much. It's like a fantasy, but a fairy tale kind of one that you've never really heard before, and they're going on this epic quest to save somebody for reasons that I won't tell you guys about, but you'll have to discover it for yourself. It's just, if fantasy fairy tale that you've never heard of before sounds anywhere down your alley, 100% go pick this up. It was funny, it was charming, it was precious. I loved it from beginning to end. So I ended up giving this 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely think I'm going to be picking up more of T. Kingfisher's work, and I need to get my hands on a physical copy of this. After that is the only non-magical readathon book that I picked up last month, and it was because I think I saw something about it on TikTok, maybe, which has not historically worked out for me in the past, but this time it did. Praise by Sarah Kate is a very adult romance. It is age gap, it is boss secretary. I think that covers the majority of the tropes that are in this. He is actually her ex-boyfriend's father, and she kind of stumbles her way into his house because she's trying to pick up a check that she is owed from having shared an apartment with his son, and ends up being hired on as his secretary. He is a CEO of something called, I believe it's called the Salacious Players Club. It's essentially a sex club, if we're being perfectly honest. He's the CEO of a sex club. And that's kind of how she gets sucked into this world, and they're fighting their attraction for each other, and it was steamy, and it was amazing, and I really, really enjoyed the entire story. I enjoyed the character development. I enjoyed her coming to terms with a lot of stuff on her own. I enjoyed her relationship with her sister. It was great. I loved it a lot. I gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read last month was Master of Iron by Trisha Levenseller. I have an entire vlog dedicated to this book, so I'm really not going to go too in-depth here. I did end up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I liked the first one better, and I wasn't sure if that was going to be the case when I started reading this one, but it definitely did. This is the follow-up to Blade of Secrets by Trisha Levenseller. Blade of Secrets is a young adult fantasy novel about a bladesmith named Ziva who has magical powers that she can imbue into the weapons that she creates. She ends up having to go on the run with her sister and a couple of other companions when a warlord is trying to kidnap her and use her powers for evil, essentially. This is the follow-up in this duology, and it ended very, very well. I was very pleased with the way that it ended, and it was just a really cute, feel-good, except for the parts that were not great, like, in terms of content. Like, it gets dark, I'll put it that way. Parts of this get pretty dark. But I still ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. I liked the series. I'm pleased that I have both of these books to read, and I really, really enjoyed my time with it. Next up, I read Monstrous by Marjorie M. Liu. I think I talked about this a little bit in my previous reading vlog, so again, I'm not really going to go too in-depth here. This is I don't know if it's alternative history, kind of. It says an alternate world of Art Deco beauty and steampunk horror. It's definitely Asian inspired, and it is entertaining. It was really, really dark at times as well. Some really dark shit happens throughout this graphic novel. But essentially, there's 2 factions, kind of, that are in a war with each other. One of them has animal-like features. I don't remember exactly what they were called. The other ones are kind of like witches, and they've been fighting this very, very long and drawn-out war between the 2 of them, and it's still kind of continuing. There's a lot of deaths and bad things that happened on both sides by both parties, and it just kind of continues. And I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. There were just some parts of it that I wasn't fully into, but by the end I was hooked because there was a specific twist that happens on, like, literally the last page that is what really drew me into this. And that is probably what's going to get me to read the rest of this series. I know that I'm pretty behind. Everybody likes Monstrous, and everybody's been into Monstrous for a really long time, so I do want to read the rest of these. I'm just not really sure when I'm going to get to them. Next was Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. Again, this was just talked about pretty extensively in a vlog that I put up, so I'm not really going to go too in-depth here. But essentially, this is an urban fantasy that takes place in the UK. Think of Her Majesty's Royal Coven in terms of, like, the TV show Fort Salem, where the witches are, like, not required to be a part of it necessarily, but they are kind of can be drafted into the royal coven of the crown, and they've been fighting this war against demons and also against other witches that believe that humans should be oppressed and witches should rule. All of this is going on under the noses of the humans because it's our world. Humans don't know that magic exists, but there's a lot of underlying magical stuff that is influencing the world around them, and I absolutely loved this. There was an adorable little romance in it. There was a awful cliffhanger at the end that makes me want to read the second book immediately. I adored this. This got 5 out of 5 stars. The last book that I managed to read in August was Only a Monster by Vanessa Len, and unfortunately this is actually already over in my unhaul pile, so I will not be going over and picking it up. I'm just too lazy to dig it out. This is a book that, again, is in that blog. Not going to go too in depth here, but it's YA fantasy. It is pertaining to Joan, who learns that she is a monster, and in this world, monsters are of specific families, and each family has a specific power. But all monsters are monsters because they have the ability to steal time from humans, like from the end of a human's life, and use that to travel through time themselves. Didn't love it. Didn't love a lot about it. Not gonna go super in depth here on why that is, because like I said, go and watch that reading vlog if you care to know why I needed to rant about it for so much in that. Essentially what it comes down to is the characters weren't for me, the writing style was not for me, and I just did not enjoy myself the entire time. I was really only rushing to finish it because I had picked it as a prompt, didn't have time to switch to anything else, and couldn't DNF because that wasn't one of the things that I could do during Magical Readathon. So I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars, which is one of my lowest ratings that I've given out this year, actually. And yeah, I didn't have a good time. So to wrap all of that up, I did finish all of my prompts that I had to for Magical Readathon. Came down to the wire. I managed to stop reading at like 10 o'clock on Wednesday night, and that was like the last night of the readathon. But I did it. I managed to finish all of the books, which means that I completed all of the classes required to become a mage hunter. I can't wait until we do this again in April, I think is when the next one is. Whether or not actually I'll be participating in that is to be seen, but I would like to. I'm going to say that as of right now. I would like to participate in Magical Readathon next year. It's just so much fun. I might create a new character, who knows, but the whole process of like the readathon with the classes and the Magical Academy, it's awesome. G created an incredible readathon that I have enjoyed participating in for the last couple of years, so that's it for all of the books that I managed to read in August. How was your guys' reading month last month? Talk to me about any of these in the comments. If you liked Only a Monster, I am sorry for the fact that I did not, and I am happy for you that you enjoyed your time. As for the other books, definitely recommend all of the other ones that I managed to read if any of that sounded interesting to you. But yeah, that's everything for my wrap-up. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out my channel. Down in my description box, you're going to see links to my Goodreads, my Twitter, and my Instagram in case you guys wanted to follow me on any of those. But that's it for me today, guys, so I'll talk to you in my next one. Bye!